Hey there YouTube, it's Patricia with through-these-eyes.com. When I was a teenager, the one thing that I knew I had to do when I turned 18 was register to vote. And that's the topic I wanted to talk to you about today. Okay, so recently, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton gave a speech at TSU in Texas on voting rights. And she wants to talk about discrimination in our voting process and how the Republicans are trying to make it harder for Americans to vote, mainly minorities and poor.
40 years after Barbara Jordan fought to extend the Voting Rights Act, its heart has been ripped out. And I wish we could hear her speak up for the student who has to wait hours for his or her right to vote, for the grandmother who's turned away from the polls because her driver's license expired, for the father who's done his time and paid his debt to society but still hasn't gotten his rights back.
She cites examples of how students have to wait in extremely long lines to vote. She mentions how grandmothers are turned away because their driver's licenses have expired. And she mentions how felons who have served their time and paid their debt to society still haven't gotten their voting rights back. Really?
And we have a responsibility to say clearly and directly what's really going on in our country. Because what is happening is a sweeping effort to disempower and disenfranchise people of color, poor people, and young people from one end of our country to the other. Many of the states that previously faced special scrutiny because of a history of racial discrimination have proposed and passed new laws that make it harder than ever to vote. North Carolina passed a bill that went after pretty much anything that makes voting more convenient or more accessible. Early voting, same-day registration, the ability of county election officials to even extend voting hours to accommodate long lines.
Okay, let me touch on these really quickly. The one that stands out to me is same-day registration, because early registration is available. It's called mailing in your ballot. And you can mail in your ballot the day you get it. You can go through it and mail it in, and it is counted on voting day. You got to understand that voting is in the Constitution, and it is specified for one day in November, first Tuesday, you've got the day to vote. But this issue that she brings up of same-day registration, okay, I'm uncomfortable with that. And it's all going to tie in because she's kind of spreading it out, you know, in a long speech, but okay, I'm going to bring it back to voter ID. I strongly, strongly believe that every person to cast a vote should be required to show a valid identification, be it driver's license, state ID, passport, military ID, some sort of valid identification that you had to show a birth certificate to get. Okay? It's not that hard, people. Same day registration to vote, meaning, oh, it's voting day today. I think I'm going to vote, but oh, I'm not registered. Oh, I'll just take my birth certificate, my ID, and I'm sure they'll let me. Okay, who has time for that? She just complained that you've got to wait in long lines for hours to be able to vote, and now you want to be able to register someone as well? Come on, people. We learned in civics class in what, 4th, 5th grade, that you need to register to vote. So if you're 18 and you haven't figured that out yet, or worse yet, you're in your 30s and you want to vote for the first time and you're like, oh, it's voting day, let me go do this. No, then maybe you don't deserve to vote. It's not that hard to register. Do it. Okay, there's my rant. Let's see what else she says.
Now, what possible reason could there be to end pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds and eliminate voter outreach in high schools? We should be doing everything we can to get our young people more engaged in democracy, not less.
Okay, hold on. Pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds? Voter recruitment in high school? Okay. All right, why? You have to ask yourself, why? She posed the question, why wouldn't they want this? Well, I want to know why she would want this. Okay, it's mandatory that guys must register for the draft at 18. Why don't they have a mandatory pre-registration at 16 or 17? But you want it for voting? You become legally an adult at 18. You can get a learner's permit to drive a car at 16, right? With parents' signature. So let's just have all the parents of the high school kids that you want to pre-register sign along with them. Oh, but you can't do that. They aren't adults, that's why. Wow, Mrs. Clinton, you are our Secretary of State. What is your purpose for wanting these kids, children, to be pre-registered to vote? It's called taking personal responsibility. At 18, I went out, probably within the first month that I turned 18, and I registered to vote. I went to my post office and I registered. You can find people that are registering people to vote in front of libraries, in front of grocery stores, in front of major stores like Walmart, all the time. I think I even saw that you could get voter registration at a Bank of America. Don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. But it's not hard. Oh, and now they have online voter registration. So, wow, yeah, stay out of the high schools, okay? They're children, and if you have someone coming on campus, it could be viewed as, voter influence, trying to persuade them to say vote Democratic, maybe, Mrs. Clinton? Because, it's the Democrats that don't want Army recruiters in high schools, right? Why? Because, we don't want to convince them to go into our military. That should be voluntary. Well, guess what? Our right to vote is also voluntary. Stay out of the high school. Okay. Sorry. What was she saying?
You all know this far better than I, but if you want to vote in this state, you can use a concealed weapon permit as a valid form of identification. But a valid student ID isn't good enough.
Okay, so she says in Texas that you can use a valid concealed carry permit as identification to vote, but not a valid student ID. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, first let me just say that's awesome. In order for you to get a concealed carry permit, you have to fill out massive amounts of paperwork. It's like this thick, okay? They do a full background check. Would Mrs. Clinton like every person to get a background check so that they can vote? I'm all for that. A student ID is not a valid identification card. I don't know what other states require to obtain a student ID, but the schools that I've attended here in California don't require much. They take you at your word that you are who you are. I've never had to take in my birth certificate to prove that I'm Patricia. So, no, I wouldn't take a student ID. And I'm amazed that she's trying to put off on the American people that she doesn't know the difference. There's a reason why You have to register to vote and not just sign up on that day. And to claim that, a school ID should be enough, no, it shouldn't.
Many of the worst offenses against the right to vote actually happen below the radar, like when authorities shift poll locations and election dates, or scrap language assistance for non-English speaking citizens. This kind of disparity that I just mentioned does not happen by accident. Now, some of you may have heard me or my husband say one of our favorite sayings from Arkansas. Of course, I learned it from him. If you find a turtle on a fence post, it did not get there on its own. Well, all of these problems with voting just didn't happen by accident.
Okay. Well, first, I've never heard anybody changing the date to vote. It's the second Tuesday in November. That's just the date. So they can't say, oh, we're going to vote on Monday instead. That's not legal. So I don't know what she's talking about there. I tried researching it, but I didn't find anything. Changing poll locations. Now, I've seen that happen in the area that I once lived. They moved it across the street and down to a bigger location so that it wasn't as crowded. So I don't see a problem with that. I really don't. There were signs all over, and yeah, there are ways around it. There's public transportation. Call a cab. Call a family member. You got to be able to do it. It's your responsibility. Own it to get to that polling place. And if it's truly a struggle, there's mail-in voting. And as far as providing interpreters for polling places, I didn't even know that was legal. Already they provide, well, at least my ballots here in the state of California come in both English and Spanish. And I believe you can contact the voting registrar if you need a different language. I don't know. Again, first of all, from a previous video, I think everything should just be in English. I'm sorry, this is America, but all right, different topic.
Yet, unfortunately, today, there are people who offer themselves to be leaders whose actions have undercut this fundamental American principle. Here in Texas, former Governor Rick Perry signed a law that a federal court said was actually written with the purpose of discriminating against minority voters. But Governor Perry is hardly alone in his crusade against voting rights. In Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker cut back early voting and signed legislation that would make it harder for college students to vote. In New Jersey, Governor Chris Christie vetoed legislation to extend early voting. And in Florida, when Jeb Bush was governor, state authorities conducted a deeply flawed purge of voters before the presidential election in 2000. So, today Republicans are systematically and deliberately trying to stop millions of American citizens from voting. What part of democracy are they afraid of? I believe every citizen has the right to vote, and I believe we should do everything we can to make it easier for every citizen to vote.
Former Secretary Clinton is running for president. And yeah, she's going to start naming names, boy. So she's basically called out Governor Perry of Texas, Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin, Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, and we can't forget Governor Jeb Bush in Florida for their policies to curb the voting rights of American citizens. Yeah, okay, what they're trying to do, honestly, is make sure that we have a good voting base. Not a voting base of dead people, not a voting base of perhaps felons that haven't been updated into our list of people who can't vote. And as far as making it harder for students to vote, again, people, all you need is an identification card. I'm going to get a little off topic here, just a tad. They're stressing how requiring a voter ID hurts people. But you need an ID to drive a car. You need an ID to collect welfare. So for all of you people that say, oh, it hurts poor people. Well, I'm sure poor people are getting welfare and they have to have an ID to get it. So yeah, if you collect welfare, if you can collect food stamps, aid for families with dependent children, unemployment, you can register to vote. So I don't buy that either. All right, off my soapbox. Let's go back. What else is she saying?
That's why, as a senator, I championed a bill called the Count Every Vote Act. If it had become law, it would have made Election Day a federal holiday and mandated early voting opportunities deceiving voters, including by sending flyers into minority neighborhoods with false voting times and places, would have become a federal crime. And many Americans with criminal convictions who had paid their debts to society would have finally gotten their voting rights back.
Okay, so she also talks about how there's an insufficient number of voting stations for the people in given areas, usually minority or poor areas, is what she says. Now, this may or may not be true because I have no way of verifying what she says. All I can tell you is what I've experienced, and I've moved around in California, and I've lived in poor neighborhoods, and I've lived in fairly affluent neighborhoods, and I've never had much of a wait to vote. I think a lot of it has to do with the number of people that turn out for different elections. I vote in non-presidential elections and in presidential elections, and I always have to wait a little longer for presidential election voting. And it's common sense. Most people want to vote for the president and could care less who else is on the ballot. Sad state of affairs, but that's the truth. How to remedy that? Well, her answer is to allow for 20 days of voting. 20 days of in-person voting. Yeah, that'll save the taxpayers some money right there. Genius, that woman. Yeah, no. We get 1 day to vote, people. You can vote early by mailing in that ballot, but 1 day. 1 day. Go vote. It's not that hard.
First, Congress should move quickly to pass legislation to repair that damage and restore the full protections that American voters need and deserve. Second, we should implement the recommendations of the bipartisan Presidential Commission to improve voting. And they set forth common sense reforms, including expanding early absentee and mail voting, providing online voter registration, establishing the principle that no one should ever have to wait more than 30 minutes to cast your vote. Third, we should set a standard across our country of at least 20 days of early in-person voting everywhere, including opportunities for weekend and evening voting. And we know that early in-person voting will reduce those long lines and give more citizens the chance to participate, especially those who have work or family obligations that make it difficult to get to the polls on Election Day. It's not just convenient, it's also more secure, more reliable, and more affordable than absentee voting. So let's get this done. And I believe we should go even further to strengthen voting rights in America. So today I'm calling for universal, automatic voter registration. Every citizen in every state in the Union, everyone, every young man or young woman should be automatically registered to vote when they turn 18, unless they actively choose to opt out. But I think this would have a profound impact on our elections and our democracy. and we should modernize our entire approach to registration. The system we have is a relic from an earlier age that relies on a blizzard of paper records. It's full of errors. In fact, we can do better by making sure registration rolls are secure, up-to-date, and complete. So when you move, your registration should move with you.
Okay, she talks a good game about modernizing the voter registration process. Interesting, she says that if you move and you register to vote, that your registration should move with you. Interesting. Considering you can't take your health care across state lines if you move. Your driver's license in California doesn't just transfer over if you move to Nevada. You got to get a new driver's license. But voting, yeah. People really, you have to ask yourself why they're trying to talk about this as if it's some huge burden that everybody has to suffer through to be able to vote. They're trying to paint it as it's so hard for you to do that they want this one, as soon as you hit 18, automatically you're registered to vote, so you don't have to worry about it. Take responsibility for yourselves. If it's something you want to do, you're going to go out and you're going to do it. They pretty much want to give you an automatic voter registration card when you're born. That seems a little fishy to me. Come on. Really?
And today we refuse to allow our country and this generation of leaders to slow or reverse America's long march toward a more perfect union. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren to fight just as hard as those who came before us, to march just as far, to organize just as well, to speak out just as loudly, and to vote every chance we get for the kind of future we want. That's what Barbara Jordan would do. That's what we should do in honor of her. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Okay, well, I've let her say her piece, and I've tried to give you my point of view from everything she said. Again, people, remember, she's running for office, and she wants to make it seem like you are being put out and you are being denied your right, and the system is against you so that you can't do what you want to do in voting, and it's just simply not true. It's not true. If you are a minority, if you are poor and you are on some type of federal assistance, I'm sure you've had to show a driver's license or an ID to get that assistance. So if you can do that, and if you can get yourself to the Social Security office or the welfare office, you can get yourself to the polling place. So yeah, voter ID should be required by anyone who wants to vote. You do not need to pre-register 16 and 17-year-olds. You should not be born with a voter card. That is a Democratic ploy to increase their base. Okay, it's all about self-ownership. You know it's your civic duty to vote, and whether or not you want to exercise that right, that is completely up to you, and the government should not be forcing it into your hand. I personally take responsibility and go vote whenever I can. You should do the same. Anyway, video's gone on long enough. Hope you liked it. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment below, and see you next video. Bye.